Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is sad to watch people move through the motions of faith, at the same time falling away when those motions never lead them to the higher love and deeper calling expected of them by Yeshua and the Father. It's almost as if we believe somehow in the easy believing Yahweh of this world, who just loves us. No matter what evil we do, because he is just love. Just love is in everything and would never hurt us. Just loves us like some old spoiling grandfather. Who will let us do all manner of sin. Then upon our deaths will turn the power of the universe over to us, allowing us to live forever in that sinful state. Because he loves us so much. With no accounting in place for our sin, nor any means of forcing us to align our lives with his will. He would never force you anyway. That's not his way. That's somebody else's way. If any of us are sleeping in that reverie today, your spiritual alarm clock just went off. And we broke off the snooze button. In other words, it's time to wake your butt up.
That's right.
Yes, Yahweh is love. There is no doubt about that. It says so in 1 John, the 4th chapter, the 8th verse. Go to 1 John, the 4th chapter, the 8th verse. The one who does not love has not known Yahweh Elohim. For Yahweh is love. There it is. Very plain. That was easy. And it is true. I'm sure most of us heard that scripture at some point in our youth. I surely did. But what is fascinating to me is this. That phrase only occurs twice in the entire Bible. And here's the other one. 1 John, the 4th chapter, the 16th verse. 1 John, the 4th chapter, the 16th verse. So we have come to know and to believe the love that Yahweh Elohim has for us. Yahweh Elohim is love. And whoever abides in love abides in Yahweh Elohim. And Yahweh Elohim abides in him. Okay, so if Elohim is love, only occurs twice in the Bible, and in intact versions. I'm not talking about partial versions, something somebody made up off the top of their heads, any of that stuff. It's only in the intact version twice. And both instances occurred in the New Testament, in 1 John. Where did so many people get this idea that Elohim is love, yet know so little about the totality of this Yahweh Elohim? Nobody knows his name. Let's try this. It's possible that unconverted, backslidden, rebellious people are constantly trying to find sly ways to doctrinally avoid Elohim's rigid but necessary commandments. And since no one wants to even think about final judgment, or worse, failure in that judgment, terminating in hell and then death, well, you already got it in your head that he won't continue condemn you in this, because he's only love. People have gone to great lengths to twist this simple biblical truth into this statement, a little bit different. Yahweh Elohim is only love. That's what they want to say. But that's not what the Bible says. If you don't believe this, let us examine some of these instances in which 1 John, the 4th chapter, the 8th verse, has been so twisted. Twisted. The fundamental flaw in this is this statement: Elohim is only love. A concept in which this conclusion is quickly reached, where adherents to this position talk themselves into believing that no Yahweh Elohim, who is only love, could ever toss someone into a death in hell for eternity. With all of these lies afoot about burning hell forever, which is in itself a lie, it makes it a setup for this other lie, because no one wants to burn forever. It is easy, therefore, to, as I said before, recreate a pet Yahweh. Within these parameters. Within these parameters, it's easy. Therefore, too, as I said before, recreate a pet Yahweh from a kindly old grandfather figure in your past who will reluctantly fling the doors of the kingdom of Elohim wide open to allow just about everyone who has ever lived to enter therein. And if you look ahead in that paradigm, you'll see that the future will mirror what you're going through right now. Show of hands, everybody that wants to go through this again. I think so. No one thinks that way. For simple people seeking a simple, humanistic, small G-O-D, whose thoughts parallel our flaws, this is perfect. But the truth is far more glorious and has more facets than the Hope Diamond. We don't see that though, because how many of you have seen the Hope Diamond? Nobody. That's the first time I came up with one that nobody has seen. That's why things are a little bit off here. No comparison to what's coming, because nothing in this world that is seen, you have seen. You have no way of knowing what's coming in the future. The nature of the Godhead, however, though, is multifaceted, where each of his attributes flow in symmetry with the others, and each is equal in all its perfections, like a perfect diamond. Thus, Yahweh Elohim's judgment is just as perfect. His plan of salvation is just as nuanced and eternal. And that eternity that he has planned is just as nuanced and powerful and ever fascinating as is his love. We have all witnessed it in some form, some more than others. But the false teachers and those not versed in Elohim's plan, and don't forget, not a lot of people know this with real knowledge. All who mislead do not do so intentionally. Some simply are not Elohim's ministers. As hard as that is to believe, some simply are not Elohim's ministers, and therefore do not know. But they are, for whatever reason, not telling their flocks this reality. The best examples are the half-book knowledge of those who are convinced that the holy days, tithing, and the Ten Commandments are all erased and done away. But the most telling scriptures for all of these are in the New Testament. That's what they read. How did they miss that? Somebody in their teaching of them avoided these things on purpose. Therefore, millions are being deceived, and others have simply given in to their sins, figuring that they have lost out already. At the worst time of all, at the very moment the world is slinking into the kingdom of Antichrist. Anybody that out on YouTube or any reliable social media knows this. And there's so many tales out there now. Who's heard this latest one? That Prince Charles is the Antichrist.
Oh my goodness. What?
Yeah, it's all over the place and people believe it.
Okay.
It says so many times that Satan is the Antichrist. And these people believe that it's Prince Charles. I laughed the first time I saw it, but I saw it so much. So many people do believe it. And this man has written books about this, and those books are flying off the shelves like nobody's business. Believers should carefully, fearfully contemplate this question. Is Yahweh all love or true love? There is a difference. Our title today, all love or true love. We have to begin to think more deeply about these things. The nature of Yahweh Elohim is key to his attitude toward his creation. First, let's consider the basic attributes of Yahweh Elohim. Much can be understood of Elohim by gaining a deeper understanding of the nature of him. And that's very simple to do. I've simplified it as much as possible. All we hear in the world is a love of change. Everything must change, as they say. You've got to change with the times. If you go back and look at some old television from 30, 40 years ago, all that's happening is changing back and forth between the same lies over and over again. Nothing new. You hear it everywhere. Yet notice the three major attributes of Yahweh Elohim, both the Father and the Son. Number one, Elohim does not. Somebody said it. The whole thing is in Malachi, the 3rd chapter, the 5th verse. Malachi, the 3rd chapter, the 5th verse. Then I will draw near to you to give you everything you want. No, that's some other version. That's not here. Start over. Then I will draw near to you for judgment. I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, against the adulterers, against those who swear falsely, against those who oppress the hired worker in his wages. That's half the world right now. Isn't it developed? The widow and the fatherless, against those who thrust aside the sojourner. Anybody that is keeping up with what's going on at the Mexican border and dig a little bit deeper and know that a couple of cartels have taken over a couple of those border towns, and anybody that comes back, they just shoot them. And nobody's going down there and doing anything about it. Mr. Biden, you're in charge. The guy in charge is blamed for everything. Against those who thrust aside the sojourner, the traveler, in other words. And do not fear me, says Yahweh of hosts. For I, Yahweh Elohim, get it now, do not change. Therefore you, O children of Jacob, are not consumed. Continue on. James, James 1, 17th chapter. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, nor shadow of turning. Even his shadow doesn't turn. Hebrews, the 13th chapter, the 8th verse. Continuing on this theme. Yeshua Messiah, the same yesterday and today and forever. Hebrews, the 6th chapter, the 17th verse. So when Elohim desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise his unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for Elohim to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Yeshua has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. How long had Melchizedek been there? He had no beginning of days and no end of days. This is a continuing theme here. Nothing ever changes. Psalms, the 119th chapter, the 89th verse. Your word is forever, Master. It is firmly established in heaven. Having established from the word of Elohim that he and his promises are forever, notice another one of these promises. In Matthew, the 24th chapter, the 35th verse. And this was one that a lot of people look over because they don't have much trust in the world not being here one day. But what does it say here in the 35th verse? Matthew, the 24th chapter, the 35th verse. Everybody got that? The heaven and the earth shall pass away. What? What's that? Ever seen that before? I won't show hands. Anybody seen that before? You will. You keep living. The heaven and the earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Well, in some versions it will. In some vagabond versions it will. It will in some unauthorized versions or paraphrased versions, it will. Or be changed somehow in a way that isn't intended the way it was in the original Bible. But my words shall not pass away. And one more promise of hope to those who may be losing hope. Family members dying. Other things that blunt your hope a little bit. Sickness, for instance. But as always, there are necessary actions behind these promises. Revelation, the 3rd chapter, the 10th verse. Because you have kept the word of my patience, I also will keep you from the hour of temptation, which will come upon all the inhabitable world. That's everybody. To try those who dwell upon the earth. Elohim does not change. Therefore, his word and his plan will outlast all other changes and all other plans made in this world, including the lie that his word has changed or that his law has no place in his plan. But there is another attribute of Elohim that should give us great hope. Holiness will also prove to be more durable than evil. Elohim is holy. Yahweh's holiness is an absolute holiness that remains at the highest degree at all times. Remember this when you're having doubts. Elohim does not conform to a standard of holiness. He is that standard of holiness. As it says in Leviticus, the 19th chapter, the first verse. And he said this to Moses. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, Yahweh your Elohim, am holy. And he slowly began to unravel the guide of how to be holy in physical terms that they already understood. Continuing in verse 3. You shall each man revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. Plural. That's Sabbaths is plural. What does it mean when it's plural? Yes. And so long we have been told by so many that the feast days are gone away. What did he say right there? Keep my Sabbaths, plural. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Note the vision of the prophet Isaiah, seeing a vision of Elohim on his throne. This is in Isaiah, the 6th chapter, the 1st verse. In the year that King Uzziah died, I then saw Yahweh Elohim sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Whose train? Not Prince Charles, huh? People will believe anything if they believe nothing. Verse 2. Above it stood the seraphs, the seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh of hosts. The whole earth full of his glory. Move on to Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, the 3rd verse. Deuteronomy, the 32nd verse, 32nd chapter, 3rd verse. Because I will proclaim the name of Yahweh, ascribe greatness to our Elohim. He is the rock. His work is perfect. For all his ways are just. An Elohim of faithfulness and without evil. That is telling you something, whether you know it or not. If you encounter evil in any way, shape, or form, it's not coming from him. It's coming from someplace else. He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are just. An Elohim of faithfulness and without evil. Just and upright is he. It is a major theme of the book that Elohim expects his people to make every effort to emulate his ways. This is made very clear. Psalms, the 11th chapter, the 7th verse. Psalms, the 11th chapter, the 7th verse. For the righteous Yahweh loves righteousness. His face looks on the upright. If you want to get his attention first, do upright things. Even we can do some things playfully, and he will turn his nose at it a little bit. That's not the end of the line for you, but everything that comes out of your mouth, judge it yourself. And he doesn't have to. Proverbs, the 15th chapter, the 9th verse. The way of the wicked is hateful to Yahweh. There it is. But he loves him who pursues righteousness. Because Elohim is holy. Those who love him will, according to his word and law, as much as is possible, live righteous lives through the grace of Yeshua Messiah and his Holy Spirit. We must do this daily, not only on the Sabbath or on the Sabbaths, or only when in the presence of Elohim's people. These people ain't holy. I'm treating them any way I want to. Don't do that. This is a way of life, not a show for the world. Why not? Look around you. The world is not impressed, and they won't be impressed until the fire starts, and it's too late then. Somebody else says sometime, when them flames licking at your butt, it's too late then. The world is, as I said, is not impressed. The world only wants to live its own way. And if it can get you to do the same thing, they can do it. Any show of morality or holiness will be scorned and laughed at. Still, our actions must be pure. We cannot do it for show and revert to worldliness when we get back home. Also, we do not test Elohim by seeing how much we can sin without provoking the wrath of Yahweh Elohim. Satan attempted this, to presume upon the grace and mercy of Yahweh Elohim by throwing himself off the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem, knowing that angels would rush to his rescue. Satan attempted this while Yeshua was fasting. Caught him at his weakest time and still couldn't get him. Satan attempted this while I said before, while Yeshua was fasting. Yeshua's reply was simple but powerful. Matthew, the 4th chapter, the 5th verse. Then the devil took him up into the holy city and set him upon a pinnacle of the temple. You sure that wasn't Prince Charles? It doesn't say it doesn't. Put it out your mind then. I won't say it anymore. You probably hear it again, but not from me. I'm just putting it out there. Not saying it's true in any way, shape, or form. I haven't got any books out there trying to sell or anything like that. But, verse 6, and he said to him, if you are the son of Elohim, cast yourself down, for it is written, he shall give angels charge concerning you, and in their hands they shall bear you up, lest at any time you dash your foot against a stone. Yeshua said to him, it is written again, two can play with that sword. And it's, whose sword is it? Mine. Yeshua said to him, "It is written again, you shall not tempt the sovereign your Elohim." The implication here is crystal clear, that even Yeshua is not to test the word of Elohim and try to test the limits of his mercy. Why? Because the entire plan of salvation has been challenged by sin. Sin has forced Yahweh Elohim to set into motion the backup plan that he also set in motion to secure this plan. The precision of Elohim, the logic and forward thinking of Elohim pressed him to set forth an alternate plan for such a necessity from the beginning of time. This wasn't something that came up out of his head at the last minute. He's thinking about this as long as he's been here. First Peter, the first chapter, the 15th verse. 1 Peter, the first chapter, the 15th verse. But according to the Holy One, who has called you, you also become holy in all conduct. Because it is written, "Be holy, for I am" what? Holy. And if you call on the Father, who without respect of persons judges according to the work of each one, nobody gets away with anything. I saw Ghislaine Maxwell on TV last night. He did it all. I didn't do nothing. Well, we'll see soon enough. Because it is written, "Be holy, for I am holy." And if you call on the Father, who without respect of persons judges according to the work of each one, past the time of your earthly residence in fear. That didn't sound like fear last night. Knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things, silver or gold or young girls, whatever it was, from your vain manner of life handed down from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ as a lamb without blemish and without spot. Indeed, having been foreknown before the foundation of the world, but revealed when in these last times for you who? Us all. Satan's sin and corruption of mankind has set in motion a set of circumstances that are coming to a head all around us. Many believe, as the world does, that nothing is different, and we will be here suffering for many more years. I don't believe that. Note the words of Peter in 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter. Starting at the 3rd verse. First, knowing this, that there will come in the last days scoffers, walking according to their own lusts. The same lusts that have always been out there. Lust for power, lust for money, lust for worldly fame, lust for a scientific way to live and live on forever without a supreme king over them. That's the important one to the world. Verse 4, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? That's the one they pull out when they got you up against the wall. Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were. From the beginning of creation. For this is hidden from them by their willing it. They don't listen to anything else. That's why they don't see anything else. That the heavens were of old, and the earth out of the water, and through water being held together by the word of Elohim, throughout which the world that was then being flooded by water perished, but the present heavens and the earth being kept in store by the same word are being kept for what? Fire. There was a book years ago. This man is still lambasted about this book. Anybody heard of James Baldwin? He wrote a book called The Fire Next Time. And this was what he was talking about. I don't know completely that he knew all the elements himself, but if you read the book, all this stuff is there. Verse 7 again. But the present heavens and the earth being kept in store by the same word are being kept for fire until the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. Yahweh Elohim is all love, but all fairness also. And if we continue in his will, we will make it into the kingdom of Elohim. Any questions? Any comments? Anything? Dwayne?
The Russians have announced that they're going to take a couple of subs up our Pacific coast and fire a salvo of missiles with dummy warheads. What makes us sure they're dummy warheads?
Well, one thing, every time they threaten him and they really don't do it right, but any time that you have the authority over someone and they acknowledge that authority and they threaten back, you should go ahead and do what your power demands. That's what they didn't do.
Well, they said it's in response to us overflying their territory. It's on an island, I suppose we didn't even know it was theirs. But a pilot flew a bomber over one
Yeah.
of their islands
Yeah,
in a test.
yeah, but that was a response to that.
Trespass, so.
That was in response to that drone that they blew up, right? Nobody said anything about that. This whole thing is the world's business. And the world's business is not always our business. And they deal with it very haphazardly. You've got the man by his gonads. Squeeze a little bit. A little bit. Just a little bit. Hear his voice in a higher register, you get the point. And until he screams out like, ah, you're not doing anything. And as long as you're not doing anything, he's going to keep doing what he's doing. That's why the book says in so many places, rumors of wars, not wars. He's not going to do anything. We're not going to do anything. Because we're just as blame filled in this as he is. Ruby.
Amazes me how all the warnings and things that had passed in the past and the things that are going to happen, people fear more than news, the gossip. They believe in that than to actually open the scriptures and see the things that are really happening are in the scriptures. But they choose to listen to media than to kneel down and pray, to meditate, to have a song of worship, even when you're going through hardship and in pain. Because that's when we truly know that we're doing what the Father asks of us to do. Not in our happy moments, not when we're distracted. We need to cause ourselves sometimes to think of what we've gone through in order for us to, humble ourselves and remind ourselves what the scriptures boldly tell us and heed to us. I'm warning you. I'm telling you. You know, it's just, I have to turn off a lot and then tell my husband, don't tell me no more about the news. Because it's already written in the scriptures. And he just looks at me like strange. But I try to explain to him, these people are not knowing. They do know what's going on, but they won't say that it's from above. They're not saying that the Father was just been warning us from the beginning of time. Thank you, Pastor.
Sherry.
Commenting on what Sister Ruby was saying, that there's so many people not observing and obeying. But in the Word it says that there's a veil over their eyes. There's a veil over their eyes, and they don't know yet. But that veil, the only one who's able to lift that veil is Yahweh himself. So there is a veil over their eyes because they don't know yet. And Yahweh is the only one that's in control to lift that veil. And he is the one that will do the calling. We don't call, but he does. But we have to be able to give an answer when we're able to. When we ask, we are to be able to give an answer, and not the answer that we think, but allow the Holy Spirit to guide our mouths and our mind to give the correct answer. And he will do just that.
Rashida.
Piggybacking off of that, I am a Daily Wire subscriber. And I love the Daily Wire too, but I don't agree with everything.
Okay.
And the things I don't agree with is that a lot of the commentators, I like Ben Shapiro, but a few of the other commentators, they like to not only point out what's wrong with what's going on with the left, especially with the transgender LGBT alphabet people stuff, but they ridicule them in a way that I think is completely and utterly unnecessary. And one thing I will say is that these people are blinded. And so you may think that you're getting to them. I feel like they're finding that they're not able to get to a lot of these people with the truth and the truth alone. So they're like, let me add a little ridicule, let me add a little judgment, let me add a little pizzazz and a little sarcasm and insulting on top of it. Yeah, it's condemnation. And I think that's another thing that's bringing people farther away from it, because it's like, okay, I get what you're saying with politics, I get what you're saying how this is biblical and this is not biblical, but when you add that ridicule and then insulting and I think
go to their level.
Matt Walsh, yeah, he said, well, I don't know why you're trying to be a woman because you're an ugly woman. And look, is that necessary? Is that necessary? Like, and you know, I understand there's a comedian.
I agree. Some of the,
You know, I get what you're
the
trying to
ridicule
say.
from the right sometimes is unnecessary.
It's unnecessary. Like, I get it, but it's unnecessary and it's not reaching anyone. If anything, it's making you look worse and it's making you
You're
look
doing the
like a
same thing
bully.
that they do, basically.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's just you can't fight fire with fire. And then when I look at that scripture that says, a servant of the Lord must be peaceable to all, able to teach, and that's not being peaceable. And you can't teach in that way when you're insulting the person that you're trying to inform. And then again, they are blinded. So the only way that they can actually receive the truth that you're getting is if the Father opens their mind to do so.
I agree, like Joe Friday would say, just the facts.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Ruby.
There's a way to do it.
Now, piggyback on what Rashida and Sister Sherry said, it's so true about the blindness part. But then I come to think, and I have to stop myself, because and then I'm subconscious condemning or hurting. Now, we think of these people that are going through all this, that never known the Word. But then you see the ones who've been in the Word, in the beliefs, and like Thurman knows Israel and all our friends in the past, and brothers in the families, and sisters and cousins that kept the Sabbath, knew about the Sabbath, did the Passover, and then they're become blind. And I'm thinking, was it because they chose not really to want to follow that caused them to become blind? So then I have to stop myself and say, Father, forgive me, because I'm already looking for reasonings or wondering why they did that, and that's not for me to be discussing it. And I have a hard time with that, because I've done it many a times with my family members and friends that've been in the church, and I'm thinking like, oh, what happened? You knew the Word. I mean, they used to shame me. And literally, they used to joke around, say, Ruby, you're so stupid. You don't know how to read. You don't know how to memorize. And these brethren and friends knew the words like this. Could throw out scriptures left or right. They were like Rashida. They knew everything. And I was always like, oh, Father, what's wrong? I can't remember. And then I'm thinking, these were the same people that used to hurt me. And I says, Father, forgive me. Here I go again. I can't do this. I have to learn to be patient, loving, kind, forgiving, repent of my own way of thinking, because that's where it starts. If I don't ask for forgiveness, I'm going to constantly saying, ooh, look at so-and-so. Ooh, that's none of my business. I'm to be loving and compassionate as Christ showed us to be.
Because Satan's coming after them harder.
Right.
Because he doesn't want them to remember the scripture. He doesn't want them to have any kind of connection. If they're really strong on those connections, pray harder for them, because Satan hates that.
Yes.
So that's another thing. Again, that's why we can't say the condemnation, because again, it kind of reminds me of what is say in James, let no one say when he is tempted that he is tempted by the Father, because the Father cannot be tempted by sin. And then also it says, with desire brings forth sin, and then sin, when desire conceives, it gives birth to sin, and then sin, when it is fully grown, then it brings forth death. So there's that temptation, and then it also said that desire brings you away. A man is tempted when he is drawn away. So that's what Satan likes to do, draw you away. And even Dad mentioned this in Matthew 4, that Christ was already drawn away because he was separating himself for that fast.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I got him. Perfect time. I got him. And not everyone can get through that.
Right.
So that's why it's like, be careful with those who are trying to do better and who are trying to memorize those scriptures. That's who he attacks harder. When you're lukewarm, it's like, oh, I can just blow on you and you fall over. So, I'm just being real. But those who are really, really hot, he's working hard to cool them down. Because they can affect others.
You're right, exactly. 'cause
Pray for those who have left, who had it, because that means that they were really tempted hardcore. I think I saw him.
Pastor Curtis, when we were in 1 John chapter 4 and we read about that Elohim is love, we have to remember to look at the Greek word that was translated from, and I'm pretty sure that's probably agape or
Agape.
agapeo.
Agape. Agapeo.
Agapeo, you know, so look at the type of love that it was in the Greek, so we have a better picture of what they're saying.
What scripture? 1 John what?
What was it, 1 John chapter 4, verse 8 that we were looking at?
And write that one.
Yeah, so, you know, that's the godly love, you know, it's not that, based on feeling things.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, like that. It's based on that commitment of doing righteousness, you know, that kind of love.
It's agape.
Yeah. So we got to keep that in mind. I know Pastor Curtis taught us to look at the words in the original language.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out.
Yep.
That reminds me, piggybacking off of that, looking at the scriptures and looking at the original language. Hold on. Actually, come back to me. I'll bring it out to you, then I'll go back to it. John 21.
While you look for that, Rashida,
Yeah, go ahead.
this past week, I was struggling a lot, saying, Father, I'm not where I'm supposed to be at. Every morning when I wake up, I open up the line for prayers. And I'm always saying, Father, forgive us for all our sins, our thoughts, deeds, anything that we might have offended, and I go on and on and on and on. Then I said to myself, I gotta read the scriptures. And then something else pops in my head. And I'm lured away. It says, Father, I did it again. I did it again. And I can't stand that. I have such a struggle with that, because I know I'm supposed to, and sometimes when I get up 2-3 times to go use the restroom, I said, Father, I can't sleep and I'm exhausted. So I'll pick up my phone and then I'll start looking at something on YouTube. Nope, I gotta do a Bible verse, so then I read a chapter. But it's a struggle, it's a constant struggle, since this is why I don't memorize, because I'm not in the Word like I should. And then when I think I'm gonna do it, something pops up. Or the kids' distraction, and my husband, and then phone calls. I'm thinking,
Once he's got you in that area, we've given him what to do, and nothing to do it, and he's the master of that.
I found it.
Where was it?
So in John 21, I'll start at 15. It's when, I'll summarize the beginning. It's when Peter went back to fishing, was supposed to, and then Christ was on the other side, and they fished all night and couldn't find anything. And then Christ was on the other side, like, hey, breakfast. I control the seas, Peter. And so there's a point where Christ asks Peter, he says, pardon me, so, let me find it. So when they dined, Yeshua said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest me thou more than these? And when Christ said, lovest me, he used the agape love. And then he said unto him, yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. But when Peter replied, he replied with phileo, not agape. Because he know that he just disobeyed. So he's like, I can't say that I love you with agape love, even though you asked if I loved you with agape love, but I can only give you phileo right now, because what I just did is that guilt. And again, he asked, do you love me, Simon, or Peter? And he used agape, and every time Peter always responded, phileo, yeah, phileo, of course I love you, but with the phileo love. So I think also just looking at those specific Greek words, you see the differences there. Because we could have just said that they both meant the love in the same way, but no. Peter responded with phileo, because he's like, that's all I can give, because I'm ashamed that I disobeyed you yet again. So it's
He was all set to forgive him, but he didn't know that. He was so inside of his own pain and suffering and guilt and all of that.
Yes.
And he didn't, I hate to say that word couldn't, because I didn't know what's in his mind. And at that specific point in time, he couldn't then. And I don't extend that all through time. But when he did it, as always, he did it perfectly. And he opened it up to him, and from that point, he could do it when he came to him that way. And of course I love you. Now, it's agape now.
But took a minute because of the
But,
guilt, that
yeah.
fresh guilt, fresh guilt.
That's the worst kind. Thurman.
Pastor Curtis, I was thinking like when a parent has to chasten their child, discipline them with, whatever they use to spank them with, that's love actually, because it teaches them to stop doing what they're doing so they don't get in worse trouble in the future. And when y'all really has to, at the final point, get ready and, exterminate somebody and throw them in that fire, that's love. It's love too, getting that evil away from everybody else that is doing right. And, and making that person where they're not continuing to go on and they just saturation in evil, just ending it.
He said that in Leviticus, I think it was, when he was going through Moses, and Moses, somebody they were about to punish, and go ahead and do it. They've done everything that they're going to do. Get rid of them now before they go back into the camp and render others to the same sin they're under.
Was it the strange fire situation with Aaron's sons? How they had to die?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. Ruby.
Pastor, I understand the word agape, but I was thrown off with the
Phileo, brotherly love. Like a brother, like Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
City of
Got it.
So
brotherly
Phileo is
love.
brotherly. And then there's Eros, which is romantic. And then there's
Story or something. I think family. Our
family.
mother
Yeah,
child,
okay.
there's like
Got
6
it.
of them in the Greek. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I hear.
Sherry.
The Father is like, we're like clay, that's the way I can describe it. And He's the potter. And He will continue to mold and shape and chisel us and
If we let him.
mold us into what
Carve
He
us.
wants us to be. But we have to be submissive to that and submissive to His molding and His shaping. And what better person to be molded by is to be molded by the gentleness of His hands and sculpture us and to re-chisel us so deeply so that we can be more like Him and less like ourselves.
Piggybacking off of that, with clay, you have to have the living water. With clay, it cannot be dry to be molded. So that's where the living water comes in, because you have to have the water in order to mold the clay. Because if you're stiff and dry with no moisture, you just crackle. You turn into pieces.
He's working too hard.
Yeah.
Moist.
And you know what? When you're being chiseled, I could just imagine, like, when we're struggling, it's owie, ooh, oh, he's carving, ooh, it's gonna do this part, ooh, another curve, like, dog, another curve. And it's something that we have to accept if we wanna make it to the kingdom, if we wanna get things right, if we love Him the way we claim we do.
That's why he so specifically in the sermon kept picking at us. We want this, right? We want this, right? We want this, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but he kept doing it because he made sure that we wanted it before he went to his part. But the part he was doing at that point was going to hurt a little bit.
Narrow is the gate, difficult is the way.
Said it was an easy road. But He
said my yoke is easy.
Right.
My burden is light.
It's
My burden is
light.
light.
Right. Trust me.
It was hard in the beginning because we got to remove the line because of the
Mhm.
nature.
Change my thoughts, my
And lose
behavior.
some of that thought you used to have.
Like, picking back to college where everything was just theories. Everything was just theory. Oh, that was the one thing I always had a problem with education. I'm like, do we ever have the answer? It's
No,
like everyone's
they don't.
always theorizing. Well,
They
my
don't.
theory is. I'm like, well, do we have the answers? And I realized that there's no answers to these questions that people are asking because they're reading the wrong books. And
If you-
you're reading the wrong book, singular. And I just realized, because that was before I was baptized, and so I was asking the same exact questions, and it was like, after getting the Holy Spirit, it was like the renewing of the mind was not easier, but not as arduous when you're like white knuckling it. And then it was like all of these existential questions. Why are we here? What's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of suffering? It's
Keep
all
living.
answered. But I feel it's like, but you need His Spirit to renew, and then that's when the yoke is easy and the burden is light. Because when you're doing it, white knuckling it with that human nature, that's when all the, we need to look at Socratic writings and you know, and read Plato, The Republic by Plato again to get these answers. No.
And if you really think about it, if you go through it, and all this stuff is out there now, I don't know why, but they're probably doubling down on people going to this stuff as the be-all and end-all of everything and getting you away from this.
Exactly.
And all of that stuff is out there now.
We were ridiculed.
For creationists. Oh, we were
Yeah.
ridiculed. So bad. Oh gosh, I had so many arguments. And this was what class was this? The history of what was it? The history of dramatic lit. Well, we shouldn't even be talking about this. It was, we were reading plays for, Arthur Miller and stuff, but I remember my teacher, he said, who here is a creationist? And I went, me? And I think it was like 2 of us who raised our hands. Really? And everyone looked at us like, you're not an evolutionist? What? No, I did this in monkeys. I'm sorry, or fish. And everyone was just hounding on me and this other person. The other lady was Catholic, but everyone was hounding on us saying, oh, you're so stupid to be a creationist, and oh, you just believe that your imaginary friend, that's what we call them, Jesus imaginary, Christ, your imaginary friend is helping you through life. I'm like, yeah, he's not imaginary, but he's helping me. But okay, I'll take it.
They'd rather be people of primordial slime.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the beginning, that they think
Yeah.
primordial slime, I
Yeah,
think is the...
exactly.
That's the first one before it turns into other things. So yes.
Really,
Yeah.
the theory
We
was
talked
really
about
just
so bad.
assumptions.
Yes.
They're basically
Oh.
just assumptions, that's what their theories are.
We want to talk about evolutionary basis.
But all of it, when you really get into it, all of them were reading from the same books from 2,000 years before they were born. And nothing has moved. And
But Darwin
anything to wonder
refuted
the
his
sun.
statements. That's the thing. Before Darwin died, he said, "Okay, this is nonsense."
Nothing new
But no one's talking about that. There's
the
still
same thing happened, if you remember, Spock did the same thing.
Wow, yeah.
Not Dr. Spock,
Oh, goodness.
Benjamin Spock. He
Star Trek.
he trashed his book in the weeks before his death, on his deathbed, and everybody trashed him for doing it because they were all using it now to mistrain their kids.
Pretty well established by then.
Thurman.
I just wanted to piggyback a proverb out of what Rashida said. And it goes, wisdom is in the sight of him who has understanding, but the eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth.
All is futile.
So they're looking everywhere, all over the place, and they're right here in these 66 books.
Right there.
And most of the stuff that they're looking at
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
came into existence years before they were born. They're looking at old stuff and taking it on for themselves as if it's new.
Or my favorite people are the people who have not read these 66 books yet, and they'll go through the Apocrypha. And they're like, I want to read the hidden stuff. It's like, why don't you just start here? You know, read the stuff he actually gave us. Why are you looking at something that actually means occult or hidden? Why would you? They're my favorite. I'm like, really?
Into them. They'd rather be interested in something that is not of the Father, because that'll keep their minds curious and question.
It's the Eve syndrome. Oh, I kind of want to know more. What's God not showing me that I want to know?
Right.
There's got to be something else.
That's the thing that really is hanging up the Jews right now. They're so deep into the Apocrypha and
Talmud.
in the book of Enoch more than anything else right now.
Everyone don't get it.
I got you.
You got to
Dwayne.
remember that the Apocrypha was part of the Holy Scriptures for a long time.
Yep.
Then the Catholic Council, it was in Nicaea,
Yep.
decided to
Yeah, they
eliminate
changed
all
Yep.
those books and take them out. They had things in there they didn't like.
Yep.
Now, some of them probably shouldn't be in there. But that's up to our own discernment, I guess.
And some of them actually do refute what's said in the other scriptures. I'm like, you can't contradict.
And
That's
I
the only
got
thing.
that book because it said,
Especially-
Apocrypha, to help you understand the scriptures. And then I'm reading and I'm thinking, what?
Well, Sarah, when Sarah, she doesn't go there anymore, but when she started going to a new congregation, was it for the, it wasn't Passover, they were taking like, was it Passover?
No, it was after Passover, way after Passover.
Was it-
Oh, it was for,
What was it for? It was for one of the holy days, but I don't remember which one.
it was for,
50 days after.
Or was it trumpets?
it was trumpets.
It was trumpets, so they were taking some communion, and they were saying that for trumpets we wash the feet.
Every
And
holy
we,
day.
every holy day, yeah, they wash the feet, and then they, it gets better, or worse, depending on what you're thinking. They wash the feet, they also partake of his blood and his body, every feast, every holy day, and then they also take of the bread and the milk, because I think one of the books in the Apocrypha says that he has a double nature, therefore you are taking from his breast, the milk from his breast.
That makes him transgender.
That's what I'm saying, but that's in the Apocrypha. I forgot, if that's what Sarah said, okay, really. Because David's like, I want some bread, and she's like, no, don't take that.
I talk about confusion.
They had real bread, like baguettes and milk. And even David said, that milk looks so good. She's like, don't you dare.
On the website,
They said
before
you're
it
taking
moves,
of his
it has
breast.
the book of Enoch being read. If you got 6
gotta
hours
read
and some
that.
minutes to listen
No,
to
but
it,
I think that's why they.
I'll take it if it's necessary, but the book of Enoch, no.
Oh, I thought you were talking
Never
about
read
milk
it.
and the bread. Okay.
I've read parts of it. Every time I tried, I ran across something that just wasn't biblical, and I just
I find
stopped.
the same thing in the regular Bible. The first thing that happens is Satan is turned into a snake virtually. He's gonna go around on his belly for the rest of his life. Next thing I read, he's walking about the earth to and fro. Huh? Something doesn't match.
Yeah, if you have a book that's going to constantly be questionable, then that means it's not good. That you gotta say, what? Let me see. Let me try to figure out. No.
Also, that tithing helps you get into heaven. That there's something in there with that too. I think also in
The
Enoch.
the Catholics still do that. That whole thing about, what is it, the way they take on so much money, and that takes away so many sins.
Indulgences?
Indulgence,
Yes.
exactly.
You know, somebody was,
They still do that. And the Pope is really, he's got people listening to him now. And he's got a line on the internet. You can get your indulgences over the internet. Yeah.
Then you can go and see.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Cash App.
They might be doing it already.
Zelle.
They're to the point where they're also promoting on the internet, on YouTube, Book of Enoch,
Yeah.
and stories of Enoch and movies of Enoch. I'm saying, if it wasn't in the scriptures, and it was something that was constantly preached by the Father and by Yeshua, then it shouldn't be of importance. But people are like, forget the Bible, I gotta get this. Forget
Yeah,
this.
it's new.
Yeah.
It's new. It's new. It's different.
Exactly, it's different, John. It's different.
And the other thing that we have to pay attention to, but don't, people are really interested in now special knowledge for themselves.
True. True.
That's, and I don't want to say the name because the thing is gone, but that's where that thing about Eve and Adam being in different places came from, the book of Enoch. And the Bible says plainly that they're right there together.
But good news, I'm noticing that a lot of people are starting to try to come into the truth. I'm not just talking about just through Sunday churches, but a lot of people are also trying to ask about the Sabbath.
That's true.
I was actually talking to my supervisor, and we were talking just a little bit about the Sabbath. We just touched on it. And she said, but why aren't we doing it the same way that they did it if God does not change? I said, exactly. So why would we change it to Sunday
The
when he
Catholics
made
did
it
that.
for the same? You know why? But people are starting to ask questions. People who were, we just touched on it a little bit. Or one of my favorite, he's a clinical psychologist. He was also a professor at the University of Toronto, but was fired for not calling someone by their preferred pronouns. But, it's a thing. But he was atheist for years. And I felt so bad because he was so knowledgeable. I'm like, man, you'd be so great. Right? The Bible, you know? And now he's reluctant, but he gave an interview with a friend of his who was a pastor, and he said, I can't understand life without God in it now. I can't understand. He said, he said he read the Bible like a textbook. He said, I just read it with no connection to it. And he said, it was the wisest book I've ever read. He said, I've studied the DSM-5. And he said, this was the wisest, most concise study on human behavior, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he said, I can't deny it. And he said, I'm a scientist. He's like, all I think about is science and, you know, the psychological developments and what we've studied as man. He said, this is making sense, and I don't know if I like that it's making them, because he's been atheist for 30 years.
Yeah, it's different.
The thing is,
his wife got cancer, and they were both atheists, and she got breast cancer. She was like stage 3 or stage 4, and she just started praying and reading the Bible and kind of developing. She's like, I can't just live my life without something bigger. There has to be something bigger than myself. So she got into the faith, and he's like, this is ridiculous. Like, but she was starting to heal, and then she was in remission for like 4 or 5 years, and still in remission. And he's like, okay, there's got to be something to this. Right. So he kind of approached it more like from a scientific standpoint. But now he's like, okay, I'm gonna go book by book because this is amazing. So now he's actually, he was reluctant because after 30 years of saying there is no God, there's nothing, that this is all just big bang and he's like, the evidence is overwhelming. And he said, I've seen the healing through my wife. He said, I can't deny this.
Right.
So yeah, so people are coming.
But can you imagine what he's going through mentally, because to know that he taught this, he told them there is no Elohim, and now he's got to carry that in his conscience, because now he's reading it and he sees it black and white and
yes.
But what better person to do it?
Right.
The one that didn't believe.
Like a Paul, like a Saul,
Like Paul.
situation.
Paul. That's Paul's draw.
Of us.
Yeah.
That was Paul's
He
draw.
was reluctant.
That's
and I'm so
right.
relieved, but I can't deny
That's
this.
good.
And he used him.
Yes, he did. So it's very Saul Paul
That's right.
parallels.
Very personal.
Yes.
Anyone here actually read any part of the DSM-5?
I read a very tiny part.
I made no sense out of it.
It keeps changing.
Yeah,
That should be a DSM 20 right now.
yeah. Every time they write it, it completely changes. And that right there proves that some of that stuff is wrong. I just gave up on it. And anybody that,
For what?
It's a
It's a-
complete encyclopedia of all of like psychological disorders.
Diagnostical, statistical manual, I believe.
So all of the like symptoms.
Psychologists and
yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of like Grey's Anatomy for
for
doctors.
the mind, yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just couldn't do it. I just, every time I get so deep into it, and it changes somehow, and everything I read before, I can't read it anymore because these changes threw stuff in it. Stuff. DSM-5.
The what?
DSM-5, the manual for the manual for mental health.
Yeah, diagnostics. Yeah.
You talk about being deceived.
Because I thought there was something beyond me. Because when you take psychology classes, you start diagnosing yourself. Some of them got a little OCD, they got a little bit of they got a little bit of borderline personality. You always think that you have things, and so I read it, and it gives you like
My
the full
sister
life.
does that to me. When she comes in, I'm doing that, you know, you got this, you got that, and she's like, you know, it's not diagnosing me. But she does that because she's been reading through years, I think 18 years, 19 years of this. She's got encyclopedias, she's got everything. I'm thinking, God, where's the father in all this? But she's got a lot of plaques like this at home, but I'm thinking, it's not enough. A plaque is not enough. You gotta read. I mean, you can believe psychologists and the scriptures, come on.
But then when I read like what I'm going through the Bible, it's so simplistic.
Yes.
It's like, oh, this is my fear. Okay, I'm doubting, and a man who doubts is like a wave tossed among the sea, and he's double-minded. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm doubting. This is what. It's so much simpler. But yeah.
So gentle.
Yes.
Yeah, that's from the maker. The maker has to have the manual. Nobody else does. If nobody else does. Yes.
Oh, you're talking about being deceived.
Mm-hmm.
I go to bed with an AM radio. I was listening to Mark Levin last night. He was ranting and raving about how awful Putin was, all the evil things he'd done to the poor Ukrainian people, and all these dead people, and just disfigured. And I said, you have been down the wrong road, brother, because they showed, you see, he was talking about an example where they had about 100 villagers murdered in cold blood and buried, and then they dug them all up and laid them out. The Ukrainian army came along, dug them up, and laid them out in the town square, each one with a blanket over them, and they showed them on 2, 5, 7, and 9, and 32, except on the uncut version online. Toward the end of the show, one of these bodies threw the blanket back and sat up. So the whole thing was fake. Thank you, Ukraine.
The thing is,
You can't believe anything that comes out of that place.
that whole thing right now is so. The whole thing started it though, when we did the same thing to Ukraine that Russians did to us with Bay of Pigs. It's the same thing over and over again. They said we sent our missiles to Ukraine. If you've got a map of the two countries, placing those missiles there was like putting there at Cuba. And nobody ever brings that up. They just talk about the awful things that Russia has done to the Ukrainians.
they put the missiles in Cuba because we put our missiles on the edge of Turkey aimed at them. You didn't hear about that agreement that they made in quiet. We'll take ours down if you
The
take
half the
yours down.
stuff that goes on, they never hear about it because